There comes a point in life when love, loyalty, and history are no longer enough to justify staying connected to someone who constantly drains you. We grow up being told that family is forever and friends are sacred, that forgiveness should be endless, and that walking away means you've given up. But sometimes holding on becomes the very thing that breaks you. Real love doesn't demand the destruction of your peace. It doesn't require you to shrink yourself just to keep others comfortable. And sometimes the most loving act you can do for them and for yourself is to let go. When you find yourself constantly walking on eggshells around someone, it's a sign that the relationship has shifted from safety to survival. You start to monitor every word, every expression, and every movement, afraid that something small might trigger anger, criticism, or cold silence. You begin to anticipate their reactions before you speak, rehearsing what to say, measuring your tone, and censoring your truth. This hyper-awareness may feel like love or care, but it's actually fear disguised as harmony. You're not being careful out of respect. You're being careful out of anxiety. Over time, this robs you of your authenticity. You lose your natural ease, your humor, your spontaneity. You start to show up as a smaller version of yourself because that's the version least likely to cause conflict. The tragedy is that the person who walks on eggshells often believes they're protecting the relationship, but in reality, they're sacrificing themselves to preserve a connection that's already become unhealthy. This dynamic often begins subtly. Maybe someone you care about has unpredictable moods, so you learn to adjust yours to keep things calm. Maybe they criticize you in small ways, your tone, your choices, your friends, until you start doubting your own judgment. You might tell yourself it's just their personality or that you're being too sensitive, but deep down, you know something's off. You notice that your peace depends on their approval. You notice that silence feels safer than honesty. You notice that you no longer feel at ease around them, even in ordinary moments. And the saddest part is that you start blaming yourself for their reactions as though your words caused their anger or your needs caused their distance. This is the emotional erosion that happens when you live under constant caution. In relationships built on mutual respect, you can be honest without fear of punishment. You can make mistakes without being humiliated. You can express needs without being shamed. But when you're walking on eggshells, every interaction feels like a test. You're destined to fail. You become overly responsible for someone else's emotions, trying to predict and prevent their outbursts, their coldness, their disapproval. That kind of vigilance is exhausting. It keeps your nervous system in a constant state of alertness. You can't relax. You can't be yourself. You can't even enjoy moments of peace because you're waiting for the next explosion. Living this way doesn't just wear you down emotionally, it affects your body too. Chronic stress from relational fear can lead to headaches, fatigue, sleep issues, and anxiety that you carry even when that person isn't around. What makes the situation even more painful is the confusion it creates. Because sometimes the same person who makes you feel unsafe can also be kind, loving, or generous. They might apologize after an argument, buy you gifts, or show affection, which makes you question your instincts. You start clinging to the good moments as proof that the bad ones aren't that bad. You tell yourself that maybe if you just communicate better or stay quieter or try harder, things will go back to the way they used to be. But the truth is, genuine connection doesn't require constant self-correction. If you have to shrink to be accepted, it's not acceptance. It's compliance. People who make you feel like you have to tiptoe often use unpredictability as control. You never know which version of them you're going to get, so you stay anxious and compliant just in case. They might say, "I'm fine," when they're not, or use sarcasm instead of directness, or punish you with silence when they're upset. This keeps you guessing, and guessing keeps you powerless. You end up trying to read their moods instead of expressing your own. Over time, your self-worth becomes dependent on their reactions. You stop trusting your feelings and start trying to manage theirs. That's not love. That's survival wrapped in loyalty. And this pattern can happen with anyone, parents, siblings, partners, friends. It's not limited to romantic relationships. In families, it might look like a parent whose approval feels conditional, who loves loudly when you're obedient, but withdraws affection when you assert independence. In friendships, it might look like someone who praises you in public, but criticizes you in private, keeping you uncertain of where you stand. In all cases, the common thread is emotional instability. You feel like you can never relax into the relationship because peace always feels temporary. Walking on eggshells also teaches you to hide your emotions. You start bottling up frustration, sadness, or anger because expressing them feels unsafe. You tell yourself it's not worth the fight and swallow the discomfort. But those unspoken feelings don't disappear. They accumulate. They become resentment, exhaustion, and eventually numbness. You begin to disconnect from your own needs because acknowledging them only seems to create more problems. Over time, you forget what it's like to have an honest, easy connection. You normalize emotional tension as a standard part of love. The most painful part of walking on eggshells is how it convinces you that the problem is you. You start to internalize the belief that if you were calmer, kinder, or more patient, things would improve. That illusion keeps you trapped. But no amount of perfection can fix a relationship where safety is conditional. When someone truly values you, they don't make you earn calmness or peace. They don't weaponize silence or anger to control you. They meet you with understanding, even when there's conflict. When every interaction feels like a balancing act, when you monitor your emotions more than you share them, when your truth feels dangerous to speak, it's a clear indication that the relationship is no longer healthy. A connection that requires constant self-censorship isn't protecting harmony, it's protecting dysfunction. True love creates room for truth, not fear. When your growth threatens someone, it reveals the fragile foundation of that relationship. The moment you start healing, setting boundaries, or choosing peace over chaos, the people who benefited from your compliance begin to feel uncomfortable. They may accuse you of being distant, selfish, or ungrateful. They might say things like, "You've changed," as if growth were a betrayal. But what they really mean is, you're no longer easy to control. Growth has a way of shining light on dynamics that only worked when you were silent, small, or endlessly accommodating. The truth is, some people loved you better when you didn't love yourself enough to say no. It starts subtly. Maybe you begin to value your time differently. You stop saying yes to things that drain you. You become more mindful of your energy, more protective of your peace. You learn to pause before reacting, to speak up when something feels wrong, to express your needs without apology. And instead of celebrating this evolution, certain people around you grow uneasy. They joke about your new attitude or roll their eyes when you talk about setting boundaries. It's as if your healing is an inconvenience to their comfort. They preferred the version of you that absorbed blame quietly, that tolerated disrespect, that never disrupted the status quo. But growth by its very nature disrupts. It exposes who truly values you and who only valued your compliance. Sometimes it's family who struggles with your transformation. Maybe you were always the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over tension or stayed silent to keep the family peace. But when you start speaking honestly, when you say, "That hurt me," or "I can't continue this pattern," you're no longer fulfilling your old role. Your authenticity threatens the unspoken rules that kept dysfunction alive. In families where silence equals loyalty, honesty feels like rebellion. So they might accuse you of disrespect or distance, but you're not being disrespectful. You're being real. You're no longer willing to participate in emotional systems that suffocate you. In friendships, your growth might expose imbalance. Maybe you were always the listener, the problem solver, the one who made others feel seen. But now you crave mutuality. You want to be met halfway. And when that doesn't happen, you begin to step back. That distance might frustrate those who relied on your endless giving. They might guilt you for changing or say you've become too serious, too focused on yourself. But the truth is, growth makes you aware of one-sided relationships. You begin to recognize how much energy you spent holding things together that were never reciprocal. In romantic relationships, personal growth can be even more threatening. When one partner begins healing, it can create discomfort in the other who still operates from old wounds. Maybe you start communicating openly, setting emotional boundaries, or expecting accountability, and suddenly the dynamic shifts. If your partner was used to you avoiding conflict or carrying the emotional weight, your new assertiveness feels destabilizing. They might say you're too sensitive, or that you used to be easier to talk to. But what's really happening is that your healing is interrupting their patterns. Healthy love adapts and grows with you. Unhealthy love demands you stay the same to maintain control. Growth isn't always graceful. It often means outgrowing people, patterns, and places that once felt safe. It means recognizing that peace sometimes looks like distance. You'll notice that the more you align with your truth, the more you repel what's not meant for you. It's not because you've become cold or proud. It's because your energy no longer tolerates chaos disguised as closeness. Some people will misunderstand your boundaries as rejection. They'll interpret your calm as arrogance or your silence as anger. But those reactions say more about their insecurities than your intentions. When someone truly loves you, they don't punish your healing. They grow beside you. It takes courage to continue evolving when your environment doesn't support it. There will be moments when you question yourself, wondering if you're being too harsh or too distant. But pay attention to the peace that comes with alignment. You'll notice that life begins to feel lighter when you stop performing for people who refuse to understand you. Growth invites loneliness at first, but that loneliness is actually clarity. It's space being cleared for people who will meet you where you are, not where you used to be. People who fear their own growth often resist yours. They'll try to pull you back into the old dynamics because it feels familiar, even if it was unhealthy. They'll remind you of the good times, ignore the harm, and use nostalgia as a leash. They might say, "You think you're better now," when in truth, you're simply trying to be healthier. Their resistance isn't about you. It's about the mirror your growth holds up to them. Your progress makes them face the parts of themselves they've avoided. Instead of celebrating your healing, they interpret it as judgment, but you can't shrink yourself to make others comfortable with their stagnation. Growth will always reveal the truth about your connections. The people who are meant to stay will adapt, evolve, and cheer you on. They'll hold space for your transformation without taking it personally. But those who benefited from your silence will try to make you feel guilty for speaking up. They'll call your boundaries selfish and your healing too much. They'll want the old you back because the old you made life easier for them. You have to remember that it's not your job to stay small for the sake of anyone's comfort. The version of you that once settled for less has served its purpose. The version of you that's emerging deserves relationships that honor your wholeness. You can love people deeply and still recognize that not everyone is meant to walk beside you forever. Some connections expire when you begin to honor yourself. Growth isn't about rejecting others. It's about respecting your evolution. And if your healing cost you people who only valued your brokenness, that's not loss. It's alignment. Repeated disrespect and lack of accountability are like slow poisons in any relationship, eroding trust and dignity one interaction at a time. It often starts small, a dismissive tone, a cruel joke disguised as humor, a promise broken without apology. You brush it off at first because you don't want to seem overly sensitive. You convince yourself they didn't mean it or that it's not worth creating conflict. But every time you excuse disrespect, it teaches the other person that your boundaries are flexible, that your comfort is negotiable, and that their behavior carries no consequence. Disrespect rarely arrives loudly. It creeps in quietly, wrapped in familiarity, until it becomes part of the rhythm of your connection. Disrespect takes many forms. It can be obvious, like name-calling, shouting, or public humiliation, but more often it's subtle, interrupting you mid-sentence, mocking your opinions, minimizing your feelings, or making decisions that affect you without including you. It's the eye roll when you express something vulnerable, the sarcastic tone that belittles your excitement, or the way they conveniently forget things that matter to you. Over time, these small moments accumulate and begin to shape how safe you feel around them. When you start hesitating to share your thoughts because you know they'll be dismissed, that's not communication, it's suppression. You learn to choose silence over honesty, not because you have nothing to say, but because you're tired of being unheard. Disrespect and lack of accountability often exist together. The person who disrespects you rarely wants to take responsibility for their behavior. Instead, they deflect, justify, or shift the blame back onto you. When you call out something hurtful, they might say you're too emotional, too dramatic, or that you misunderstood them. They twist your reality until you question your own Perception. This is emotional manipulation disguised as misunderstanding. You begin to doubt yourself, wondering if maybe you really are overreacting. That's how control is maintained, not through power, but through confusion. You end up apologizing just to restore peace, even though you were the one who was hurt. The refusal to take accountability is a clear indicator of emotional immaturity. It's the inability to say, I was wrong, or I hurt you and I'll do better. Instead, these individuals protect their ego at all costs. They rewrite events, change narratives, or bring up your past mistakes to avoid facing their own. Accountability requires vulnerability. It requires admitting imperfection. But for some, that vulnerability feels like defeat, so they deflect responsibility and hide behind defensiveness. Over time, this creates a cycle where you keep hoping they'll change, they keep promising they will, and nothing ever shifts. You're left carrying both the pain and the effort to fix it. When someone repeatedly disrespects you and refuses accountability, they're not just hurting your feelings, they're teaching you that your feelings don't matter. You start to internalize that message and it begins to influence your self-worth. You might start believing that maybe this is what you deserve, or that expecting respect is asking for too much. But the truth is, respect is the foundation of every healthy relationship. Without it, love becomes conditional, kindness becomes manipulation, and trust becomes impossible. Respect is not about perfection. It's about consideration. It's about valuing another person's experience, even when you don't fully understand it. The danger of staying in a relationship where disrespect and lack of accountability are normal is that it changes you. It makes you quieter, less expressive, less sure of yourself. You start to anticipate disrespect before it happens, preparing emotionally for impact. You lower your expectations to avoid disappointment. And in doing so, you begin to lose parts of yourself. You lose your sense of voice, your confidence, and sometimes your hope. You might even start mirroring their behavior, snapping back, using sarcasm, or detaching emotionally as a way to protect yourself. That's how toxicity spreads. You adapt to dysfunction to survive it. When you confront someone about their disrespect and they turn it into an argument about your reaction instead of their action, that's manipulation. When they hurt you and respond with excuses like, that's just how I am, or you're too sensitive, they're not explaining themselves. They're excusing themselves. True accountability doesn't require a debate. It sounds like, I see how that hurt you and I'll work on it. Anything less is avoidance. The people who truly respect you don't wait for you to break down before they acknowledge their mistakes. They listen, they adjust, and they care enough to change. In family relationships, lack of accountability can be especially painful. When parents or siblings dismiss your boundaries or invalidate your experiences, it can feel like betrayal wrapped in love. The guilt that comes from confronting family members can silence you for years. But even family doesn't have the right to continually disrespect you. Blood might connect you, but respect sustains you. You can love someone deeply and still recognize that their behavior is harmful. Love without accountability becomes emotional chaos. In friendships, disrespect often hides behind jokes or familiarity. A friend who constantly teases you about your insecurities or ignores your boundaries is not being playful, they're being careless. When you confront them and they laugh it off, it reveals their comfort in disregarding your feelings. True friends correct their behavior when they realize it hurts you. They don't need convincing, they care enough to listen. Accountability is the bridge that keeps relationships whole after conflict. Without it, every hurt becomes a scar and every apology loses meaning. When words are not followed by change, they become manipulation tools rather than expressions of remorse. You can forgive someone many times, but without accountability, forgiveness only buys more time for repeated behavior. You start to see patterns instead of progress, cycles instead of solutions. The moment you start accepting repeated disrespect, you begin teaching others how to treat you. Boundaries are not walls, they are self-respect in action. You can't force someone to change, but you can refuse to participate in your own mistreatment. When someone consistently chooses ego over empathy, blame over ownership, and pride over peace, it's a sign that your emotional safety doesn't matter to them as much as their comfort does. Trust can't survive in an environment where accountability is absent and disrespect is normalized. It's not your job to keep explaining basic decency to someone who refuses to practice it. You deserve relationships where apology is not a performance, but a commitment to do better next time. Choosing peace over toxic loyalty is one of the hardest decisions you'll ever make, especially when the people causing you pain are the same ones you love deeply. We're taught from an early age that loyalty is a virtue, that it means staying no matter what, that real love is proven through endurance. But endurance without peace is not loyalty, it's self-abandonment. There's a kind of loyalty that's rooted in love and integrity, and then there's the kind that's built on guilt, fear, and obligation. The difference is in how it feels in your body. True loyalty brings calm. Toxic loyalty keeps you in constant tension. Toxic loyalty convinces you that walking away makes you ungrateful or heartless. It whispers that good people never give up, that you owe it to others to stay, even when you're breaking inside. You keep showing up, keep forgiving, keep making excuses for behavior that doesn't change. You tell yourself that maybe this time will be different, that maybe if you love them harder, they'll finally see your worth. But toxic loyalty isn't about love, it's about fear. Fear of being judged, fear of being alone, fear of being misunderstood. It keeps you bound to people who drain you, under the illusion that leaving would make you the bad one. Peace, on the other hand, asks for courage. Choosing peace means choosing yourself, even when others call it selfish. It means stepping away from chaos, manipulation, or emotional exhaustion, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally realized your care was killing you. There's nothing noble about staying loyal to pain. There's nothing admirable about sacrificing your mental health for people who refuse to take responsibility for theirs. Peace doesn't demand explanation, it demands honesty. It's the quiet knowing that you've done your part, that you've loved deeply, forgiven freely, and tried sincerely, and now it's tying me to protect your soul. In families, toxic loyalty often masquerades as duty. You might hear things like, but they're your parents, or family always comes first. So those words can feel heavy when the people they refer to have consistently hurt or disrespected you. Society tells you that walking away from family is unthinkable, but what's rarely acknowledged is the emotional cost of staying. When love becomes conditional, when your boundaries are mocked, when your needs are dismissed, staying becomes a form of self-betrayal. It's not disloyal to remove yourself from dysfunction. It's healthy. Blood may connect you, but behavior determines whether that connection is nurturing or toxic. In friendships, toxic loyalty can look like being the constant rescuer, the one who forgives betrayals, overlooks insults, and keeps giving chances long after trust is gone. You might keep showing up because you remember who they used to be, or because you fear the guilt of saying no. But nostalgia isn't love. Holding on to someone out of habit or history is not the same as holding on to them out of harmony. Peace requires discernment, the ability to separate who someone was from who they are now. When a friendship begins to cost you your confidence, your rest, or your joy, peace must come before obligation. In romantic relationships, toxic loyalty often hides behind the language of love. You convince yourself that staying through mistreatment is proof of devotion, that every relationship has flaws, and that leaving means you failed. But staying in a relationship that constantly hurts you doesn't make you loyal. It makes you exhausted. Real love doesn't require you to lose yourself. It doesn't thrive in cycles of hurt and apology. Choosing peace might mean walking away from someone you still care about, and that's what makes it so painful. But love without peace becomes torment, and loyalty without respect becomes imprisonment. People who benefit from your loyalty will always frame your departure as betrayal. They'll call you ungrateful, accuse you of overreacting, or use guilt to pull you back in. But peace has no interest in proving itself. You don't need to defend your decision to anyone who refused to understand your pain while they were causing it. Peace is not loud or dramatic. It's steady, quiet, and grounded. It doesn't seek revenge. It seeks restoration. And sometimes that restoration begins when you finally walk away from what's breaking you. The internal conflict between loyalty and peace can be agonizing. You might lie awake at night, replaying conversations, wondering if you could have said something differently, wondering if you gave up too soon. But peace doesn't come from fixing others. It comes from releasing what's no longer yours to carry. The truth is, loyalty has to have limits. Without boundaries, loyalty turns into servitude. Without self-respect, loyalty becomes submission. You can love people from a distance, you can wish them well, you can forgive them, but you are not obligated to stay in spaces that destroy your inner stillness. Choosing peace also means redefining what strength looks like. Strength isn't staying until you're numb, it's recognizing when something has reached its end. It's choosing not to participate in endless cycles of hurt just because you're afraid of starting over. It's being brave enough to disappoint others rather than continuing to disappoint yourself. It's learning to live with the discomfort of being misunderstood, because peace will always cost you misunderstanding from people who can't see your healing as anything other than betrayal. When you finally begin to prioritize peace, you notice how quiet it feels. There's less chaos, fewer arguments, less anxiety about who's upset with you. You start to breathe differently. Your nervous system begins to relax. You realize that peace isn't boring, it's sacred. It's the space where you can think clearly, feel freely, and grow without fear. And once you've tasted it, you'll never want to trade it for the noise of toxic loyalty again. Choosing peace doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop caring what isn't yours. It's not abandonment, it's alignment with your well-being, your boundaries, and your truth. At some point in life, you have to stop proving your loyalty to people who keep asking for your pain as evidence of love. Every relationship, family, friendship, or romance should be a space where you can breathe freely, speak honestly, and grow without fear. When that space becomes a battlefield of control, guilt, and disrespect, staying only deepens the wound. Walking away doesn't mean you failed. It means you've finally chosen truth over illusion, peace over pressure, and self-respect over self-sacrifice. It means you understand that love without safety isn't love, that connection without accountability isn't connection, and that loyalty without reciprocity is captivity. You are not cruel for choosing yourself. You are simply refusing to keep betraying your soul to prove that you care. Some doors must close for peace to enter, and sometimes the greatest act of love is to release what continually hurts you, so both hearts can finally heal in their own way.